So we talked a little bit about the fact that most of us probably eat too many carbohydrates, more than what we can justify at least, which is going to cause us some metabolic problems, one of which is gaining weight, not being able to get the fat off. It's also important for all of us to understand basically how your digestion works. So when you eat food, what you're eating the food for, apart from the pleasure, is to try and get that energy and the nutritional value of the food into your bloodstream so that your blood can carry it to all your tissues. Every cell in your body has to be fed in a right way for the cell to work properly, for you to stay healthy. So if you look at some food that you might eat, doesn't make any difference, pizza, steak and 3 veg. If it contains a little bit of everything, then the digestive process starts in your mouth. You start chewing the food in order to start breaking it down. You produce a little bit of saliva which starts the breakdown particularly of sugars. And then when you've chewed it, then it goes down a tube called your esophagus into your stomach. Your stomach is like a muscular sac. Once the food goes into your stomach, all these little organs around the stomach start throwing in a little bit of digestive juices, little acids, etc., to help break down the individual components of the food that you've just eaten. And because your stomach is like a sac, it starts to pulsate a little bit, like a washing machine, to mix everything up until it finally breaks everything down into like a toothpaste type of consistency called chyme. And then once it gets to that consistency, the mush then goes into your small intestine. And this is where the magic starts to happen. That's where more digestive juices are poured in, and it breaks down each of the foodstuffs that you've eaten, the protein, the fat, and the carbohydrates, into really, really small individual components, elements. That's when they're small enough that they can migrate through the wall of the intestine and then through the wall of the blood vessel that surrounds the intestine and then enter the bloodstream. Once the food nutrient goes into the bloodstream, then your blood carries it to every cell of your body, and the cell uses it in the way that it was intended to be used, to keep you healthy. So it's a really good standard, when it works well, standard procedure that you need to understand. So I've got my little diagram. We start off, say you're eating a pizza, okay? Meat lovers. So it's got proteins, fats and carbs. You start chewing it. You break it down, it goes into your stomach, it then goes into your intestine, and you have to break down these fats, proteins and carbs into such small molecules that they're small enough to go through the wall of the intestine as well as the blood vessel. What you break proteins down to is an acid called an amino acid. Single molecules, small enough to migrate through the walls. What you break fats down into is fatty acids. Small molecules, small enough to migrate through the walls. And what you migrate carbs down to are small molecules called sugars. In particular, the one that we like to use as a human is glucose. And then once they get broken down, they all go into your bloodstream so we can use it. The problem is though that when we eat too much of anything, not just sugars and fats, protein's the same, our body is constantly monitoring the nutrient level within our bloodstream, and it doesn't like it when things go out of whack. So if you've eaten too much of anything, fats, carbs and protein, your body will recognize it relatively quickly and it has to take preventive action again. And again, it's your liver that does all the work for you. And your liver, you really want to keep that healthy. It causes you lots of grief if you don't. So your liver will convert excess protein, for example, it converts it into a fatty acid. And that fatty acid can then, if you can't use it for energy, will get pushed into your fat cells so you can use it for energy later on. And we all know we've got shitloads of fat cells lying everywhere, so we're not going to run short of those. It can also convert the protein into a sugar, by the way, but we only ever use that if we're short of sugar. And like we were talking about in the last session, I don't know anyone who doesn't overconsume carbohydrates for what they need, so it's really not a normal process anymore. If you convert too many of your sugars, you've eaten too many sugars, then, and you're not using them, you've stored as many as you can like we just discussed before, then the excess sugars, as they're going through the liver, gets converted into fatty acids again. It's the way that your body is meant by biologically and evolutionary terms meant to conserve the energy value of the food. Remember, we've survived for millions of years through this feast and famine type of approach. So it all sort of makes sense. If you eat too much fat, then obviously those fatty acids are going to end up in your fat cells as well. So the second message is, it's not just fats and carbs that can cause the problem. It's indulging overly in anything. It's going to ultimately cause our problems. So we're going to talk next about carbohydrates in particular, because I think everyone's got a bit of a problem with that.